Hey everyone, just wanted to spend a few minutes talking through this Replen cruncher that we put together. Just want to make sure that people have a sense of how to use it and what questions you might have and how to voice those questions. Oftentimes it's easier to see these things rather than just read all through the notes. There's a ton of notes in that file, but that isn't always as descriptive as it could be. So what we want to do today is actually introduce the tool, what's there, what you have to do to actually get that workbook file up to the point of being usable, and what specific custom data that you need to enter into it so that it reflects your team and how you want to look at the data. Then how to actually use this tool, what steps you need to do, where the data come from, how to enter those data into the tool, and then how to execute the various commands. At the end, we'll just look at any sort of troubleshooting. We'll talk a little bit about the limitations of the tool because there are some. And then if people want to, we can continue developing this tool to make it a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more powerful, and ultimately give better results at the end. So yeah, let's just jump into it. So what we're trying to do here, this tool is actually specific to the replenishment group. So we're looking at really two different things. It's the fill active direct, which some people will call put away, but it's that fill active direct data. So the cases that we're pulling, and also the reserve cases pulled. So this is all of the INT1s, the regulars, the INT2s, one-to-ones, and the INT3s, the put to store cases that the drivers are pulling from reserve locations and sending to the proper locations. These are all done on a per user basis, so we can see how many cases and units, if we want those, are being processed by an individual. And then we're going to marry that up to the Kronos data so that we can see the various rates, the cases per hour for an individual person. Obviously, we can then sum that up to see how are people doing from the fulfillment team or the replenishment team and things like that. Because certain people do actually participate in fill active direct operation, even if they're not in the replenishment team per se. I will tend to use the acronyms. They're probably not acronyms used in this building, but it's just easier to talk about fill active direct as FAD and reserve cases pulled as RCP. So you will see that maybe in this presentation, definitely in the tool when we get there. The idea is to tabulate all of this data. So we've got data coming in from different locations, the fill active direct reports, and then we've got the Kronos time data coming in, and it's actually not, at least to me, it wasn't very easy to consolidate those data into one look so that I could easily crunch through and discover my CPH for my people, and then to sum that up into what does a day look like, what does a week look like, what does a month look like, etc. So that's the goal. Is this tool takes these data from different locations and consolidates them together. Okay. So it makes some assumptions. So the three assumptions really are: how to get the data for your drivers, for your teams, for the people in the pick mod. It also assumes that you know how to download and export your Kronos data. If you do not know how to do these things, no big deal. It's pretty easy. We'll shoot you an email. Just let me know, and I'll shoot you the email. That I think it came out from Alicia earlier this year in 2023. And then the report is just a report. It might not be a report that you've been using, so you might not. I mean, there's 100 reports, so if you don't know that report, fine. But it's located in that location there on that top bullet. And then you have to know how to use Excel. You don't have to be a power user. You don't have to know all of the functions and nuances. That's fine. But you do have to know how to cut and paste and how to do filtering. It would be incredibly helpful if you know how to use pivot tables. If you don't, it's super easy to learn. Just let me know. And then I want to spend some time on this top bullet where I got a little bit too carried away in the narrative here on this slide, but macros are very discrete in nature, and so they are fixed at addresses and locations. They are looking for specific names. Most of us, even if we don't understand this or think about it consciously, we do get used to the fact that Excel tends to be dynamic in nature. The macros that are used here are not. So that what that means is you can't move things around in this worksheet. You can't rename things in this worksheet. And I'll just give you a quick little example of what I'm talking about. So let's just create a new workbook, and we'll create something that's just a little, I'll blow this up just a little bit. So if I create just a quick table and do units, and I say Bill, John, and Sally, Smith, Jones, and Drews, and then we do something like that. That creates a table. Now if I come over here and I want to have a summary, I'll blow this up. If I do that and I want to type in here, I want the summary for John, then there's a couple ways I can get that data out of that other table. I can do a VLOOKUP table where I'm going to look up John, and I'm going to specify looking in this table, and I want the third row here because I want to find out where John is, and I want to capture that 44. So I'm going to say I'm the third row, and there we go. So we get his units, and I can find it kind of another way. I can use the sum ifs, and you don't have to know these functions. That's not the point. The point is I want to show the dynamics, and we're going to look here, and then we want to look on John's name. Okay, so either way we get 44, and we can, because this is such a simple, we can see that yep, John is 44, and we get 44. Fair enough. But what I want to point out is normally we're used to this dynamic, and we can see right here that Excel was smart enough to specify that this came from sheet 1. I can later decide, and we see this in this one too, it's specifying something over on sheet 1. That's where we looked over here. If I later decide I don't want that to be sheet 1, I want to call this master data. Okay. Well, if I come over to my equations, I can see that's automatically been updated. It now doesn't say sheet 1, it says master data. I can even do it down here and change this to summary. Same thing. It changes to the summary, so it's dynamic. I don't have to go back in and correct for these formulas. If I later decide I'm not using the last name at all, I'm just going to delete this. I don't need last names. Now we can see we've got a problem. This one was fine. It actually shortened up the where it was referring to, and no problem. But this one, even though it shortened up the table that it was referring back to, this third column was always hardwired. That wasn't referring to a cell that was dynamic. It's trying to look in the third column of a 2-column table now, and it gives me a problem. So that's the difference between something being dynamic and not being dynamic or being static. All of the macros work more similar to this, so that if you start changing names, if you start changing locations, if you delete things that you think aren't being used, you're likely going to break something. All right, so we'll hopefully that's clear. There's a little bit of a long description for that, but just know that you can't be moving things around like maybe you're used to doing. The second thing on here is I'm not a programmer, so there's lots of fragile parts of the code. So there's not a bunch of error handling routines in here. So if you put in nonsense, either on purpose or by accident, you may get some errors. Let me know if that happens, if it's not obvious to you why something's not working. It could be a bug, it could be just some misunderstanding, but my contact information here is at the bottom of this page. The third thing in here, macros can't be undone. So there's no back button. Once you execute a macro, maybe that macro overwrites some data that you weren't expecting, and you think, oh goodness, I want to get that back. There is no back button. Once that macro has been run, that's it. What you see is what you get. And if you want to recover anything that was overwritten or deleted, you're going to have to restore that with a previous save of that file. It's macros are permanent. Okay. All right, so let's jump right into what the workbook looks like, and I'll come over here. So you'll have this file, and when you try to open this file, a couple things might happen. The first thing, you might get this error message. This is a good example of me not being a programmer. I introduced something that's not that Excel doesn't love during my programming. I'll try to find this. Right now, it's not affecting the way that this workbook works, but you might get this um, this warning that says something's got a problem. Do you want us to try to fix it? Yeah, let's try to fix it. And then it says it's got something, and I don't know what this is. I'm looking at this, so you don't need to report this. But when I open this, this is my home computer. It says, "Hey, I'm blocking this. You can't run any of these macros because this is an untrusted file." If you get this, like I did, I'm going to go ahead and close that, and go back to where that file is, and I'm going to right-click this, and that brings up the extra menus, and I'm going to go into the properties, and you can see down here security right here. My version is probably my security settings on my computer. Um, Recognizes that this came from somewhere else, and it also knows that it has macros, and it's saying this could be a problem. Something might be off, and so we're going to block it. So I have to go in here and click the unblock and apply that. Now you can see that message goes away. It's a bona fide file now. Now when I open it, I'll still get that same error message about the problem. Yes, we want to correct that. Okay, we'll close that. Now I just enable the content and tell Excel that I want to use the spreadsheet. I'm good to go now. Everything is functional. If you want, you can straight away click on this instructions tab, and it goes through a lot of the information that we're covering today. But we'll just walk through it. So I want to explain what's here. We'll come back to these blank sheets. That's where your data are going to be loaded, and then your Replen database and your report, that's where the data are going to be distilled into. The two areas that we want to look at, one, version control is just as I launch new versions, you can see what's changed. So if we go into the team, you can see this is loaded with my stuff, and I left that in here just so that you can get an idea for what's here. This is absolutely critically important that you fill this out for your team. The routines will continually use this to know what's important to you. So I will only ever get information about people in this list. So I am on the PM shift. So I don't, of course, want people's data from the front half days or the back half days. I want those data sort of stripped out because I don't care about that. That doesn't affect my rate. So this tells the routine that only collect data for people in this list. So you'll want to do the same thing with your folks. And there's a couple things here. There's the full name. This name must be identical in every way to what's in Kronos. Very, very important. I've got a good example down below, Adam Sylvia. Adam Sylvia, for whatever reason, is in Kronos with undercase letters. You can see that his name Adam and his last name Sylvia are lowercase. Why? I don't know. Here's another one, Corbin Schulte. Don't know why that was done that way in Kronos, but it was. And because it was, it's very important for me to maintain that, because the tool will use this the data coming out of Kronos. Unless you want to go back into every single export from Kronos and correct it there too, it's better just to make this identical. So those stay as undercase in my master list. You don't have to do this. I thought I was going to use first name, last name. I didn't end up using it, but I kept it here again because it's not dynamic. You can just leave these blank if you want, but leave those columns there. Then you'll use the user ID. Again, this must be identical to what's in the WMS system, the AS400 Felix. So whatever your users are in there, this must be identical. This is what's going to come out in the report. So the full name used by Kronos, user ID is used by our reporting system. And this lookup table is what allows us to connect those two. Because otherwise, in this highlighted example, we wouldn't know how to connect Becky Bennett's hours to BE Bennett user ID. So this allows us to connect that. I use the team because I have different people engaging in different activities. This allows me for Fill Active Direct to understand the people from the replenishment team as opposed to those people from fulfillment or transportation. This is just a copy exact from the first column. We do use this column, so go ahead and copy that over. And then finally, getting the user IDs, and this is very easy to get from Kronos, so you don't have to enter these by hand. You can just copy paste from your Kronos output, and that allows us to use this if you want to post it later. We don't, at nights anyway, we don't post by names. We post by employee numbers, and that gives a sense of anonymity so people don't have to feel like they're being compared. We can debate the philosophy of that later, but that's what the user ID is used for. It's just sort of to mask the data so that when you present it later. Okay, and all of what we talked about is covered in this blue arrow, so you can come back and read this later. Don't worry about terminated employees. Keep them in the list. It's fine. It doesn't do anything, and it does allow you later, if you wanted to crunch data from previous months over again, these people will still be found. They were active at potentially at the time, and you don't want those data just to be lost forever. So just go ahead. As you get new people, just keep adding them to the bottom of the list. They don't have to be resorted or alphabetized. So yeah, you can just keep the list going. The program is smart enough to know that if I add another person, then this list is 90 rows long. It always looks, it will self-adjust. So don't worry about that. Just keep adding new people as you get them. Okay. The next is the activities tab. So working kind of backwards here. The activities tab is kind of what allows us to take what's noted in the reports. So again, we use the reports. We've got this complete disconnect between our reporting structure and Kronos, right? Kronos uses names. Reports use user IDs. Reports use verbal descriptions for activities. Kronos uses codes. So we constantly have this mismatch, and we have to bring those things back together and have basically a lookup table to tell Excel how to join these disparate pieces of information together and stitch them together. And this is what happens here. So for me, I've put in 1282 codes to match up with retail case pulls, which is basically INT2. All right, so you need to fill this out with your own codes. If you have, I think columns B and C should more or less stand alone and be consistent, but you have, of course, have to put in your own job codes, because I'm using things in here from the PM shift. So 1282 is our code for polling, and then 1098 is the code for fill active direct. I think days might be 1096, or maybe that's just front half. Either way, you need to fill this in so that you get the proper data. Okay. Once you've done that, now the workbook is ready to be used. Okay, so that's all just the setup. Once you've done this once, that's it. Save it. You're good to go. Just like I opened this workbook up for this session, you can see that it's all together. It's fine. It'll always be that way. I might add more people to the names, etc. But otherwise, it's ready to go. It will always be ready to go. Now we can start populating data. And so this is where you have to understand how to export these data. And I'm not going to walk through that. I can put up another video if there's enough people who want to see how that's done. There was email instruction earlier in 2023 from Alicia on how to export Kronos. Maybe it came from Melissa. I can't remember which, but we can forward that email and even put together one of these much shorter videos if you want to know more about that. When you export Kronos, it should look like something like on the screen that we're looking at. There's this header information, and it tells sort of when I grabbed this data, the period of time, all that stuff. And then it gets into the actual data. And so in Kronos, there's a couple of things. There's a grouped by date, and then later there's the actual start and stop times. And for the day shift, these I think probably look the same, and there's not much interesting going on. For the night shift, it's a lot more complicated because our shift goes overnight. So our shift begins and ends on a different calendar day. And that creates some issues that I have to work through. And part of what led to me creating this was that nuance of how our shift crosses over days. It also explains why I can't really give daily rates because it gets really screwy. Anyway, this tool will always use the grouped by date, and all that just means is the shift date. So you can see on the second row, I'll blow this up. You can see that this is a group date on April 30th, but the shift actually ended after midnight. So we see those types of artifacts in the PM shift data. Same thing here, right? So it's grouped on the 30th of April, but the shift actually, the start and stop time were actually the next morning because it's between midnight and 1:16 a.m. So because of that, we always use the group by date because that's the shift date. That's when they were working the day of the shift. And then we will parse out all of this. This is where we get the code. You can see up here. From all of this gobbledygook, we want to get 1282 out of. Don't worry about that. That's what the code does, et cetera, et cetera. So, this is what it looks like. Your file should look like this when you export it from Kronos. So what we want to do is grab it all. So I'm just going to highlight all of this. I'm going to copy it, Control C, and then I'm going to go back to my Replen data cruncher, and I'm going to go into the aptly named Put Kronos Data Here tab, and I'm just going to paste it. Okay, there it is. So everything is there. I am ready to go for my Kronos data. And if all we want to do is crunch Kronos data, we can immediately go and do that. I'm going to crunch it all at the same time, so we'll see a more comprehensive data set. But if you just want to analyze your hourly rates, that's it. You can be done. You can go back over to your control panel, and we can start crunching the data. Okay, but I want to get my reserve case polls, and I want to get my fill active direct. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go back over to my test data that I've previously. So I'm going to go fill active direct. So again, this is that report that was linked to in that PowerPoint. So if you're not familiar with this report, fine. I don't know that it's used a ton. For me, the data as it comes out are completely unusable. I can see that this person, this user ID, this is a day shift person. I'm not familiar with that person, but I can see with my eyeballs how they're doing on a daily cases and units for Fill Active Direct. But to actually use this within Excel, to put this into a table, or to put this into a chart, or to combine it with somebody else's work, this is one of the most convoluted tables I've ever seen in my life. And the first time I saw this, I was sort of depressed. Like there's no way I'll ever be able to get down and use this data. That's kind of the genesis of this whole effort, was how do I crunch this down and parse it out so that I can use it. So But the good news is I did do that, so we're good to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight everything, same thing. We're going to pull over A through F. We're going to control copy it, and then we're going to paste this into our, and we're going to put this into fill active direct because that's what it was, and there it is. So now I have all of the right information. And again, I don't have to worry about the fact that this is a day shift person and I only care about nights. Again, the tool will filter all of that out for me and put all of this into um, uh, a format that can be used. I mean, even the date, right? The date is not a date, right? That's just a big number. It's whatever that is, 20 million or 2 million, 23, whatever. That's a number. That's not a date. So the whole thing has to be reworked. But the tool does that for you. Okay. And then last, we're going to grab our reserve case poll data. Again, this has been previously exported. You'll have to export these against the date range that you care about. And we'll go back in here and put it in the reserve poll report. And if you don't like the names of these tabs, sort of too bad. Do not change the names of these tabs. Like if you're like, I don't like the name res poll report. I want to call this reserve case polls or case polls. If you change the name of that tab, the whole thing breaks. You can't do it. So you have to kind of live with the names that I came up with, whether you like them or not. Sorry. Again, back to that, it's not dynamic. All right, so now we have all of our data loaded. So we've got the tool was set up with my team, and the activities were set up with my codes. And so the data now have been loaded in, and I'm going to crunch the report. So when I click on this button, it brings up this this user form, and there's a few things going on here. Each one of these areas has its own help button. So if I click on that red question mark, it's going to give me a little bit of information. If I, what do you mean by data of interest? Then it's telling me you need to select the type of data that you want to crunch. Blah, blah, blah. I can already see that it's not rendering the same on this computer as the one that I built it on. So interesting. But you can click on those if you want more information. We have data from all three areas, so you'd only select the areas that you care about. So if we only wanted to crunch Kronos time records, then we'd leave the other ones blank. It's no big deal. I'm not sure the override append thing isn't. I don't know. It might be a little bit buggy, but it doesn't really matter right now. Here, the codes are in here. I'm going to add in more home codes, 1168 and 1121. I want those to be included in my data because I've got fulfillment and transportation in there. And then I'm going to open up my Kronos date range. I may take the state range out. I don't think it actually has utility for this tool. It's a carryover. I actually built a smaller version of this for Mike Knapp, but this I don't think gives much function. So I'm just going to widen that out because I don't have a bunch of extraneous data anyway. Once I've loaded everything that I want, right, I've told the data of interest. There's not much going on here in options. I've put in the codes that I care about. You might have to change these. If there's more Active Direct codes, make sure you tick the box and enter the code. If you enter garbage into the code, if you accidentally, fat finger a hyphen in there, that might create an error. At the very least, you won't get the information because it's going to be looking for 1168 dash, and it's going to ignore all of the 1168 that you actually wanted. So just be precise. If you add stuff in here, like if you wanted to add code 5, quadruple 5, that's not actually good enough because I didn't tick the box, so it's going to ignore it. So make sure you do both if you want additional code. So like if you wanted to create one that's Active Direct for all time shifts, you could put in the front half days and back half days, and then all of a sudden you've got a database for everything. All right, so I've done it all. I'm going to hit the crunch data. Now, there's this little note down here in the red. It's very wordy, like most of this video has been. But what this says is I'm not a computer programmer, so I use pretty basic command sets. For example, I use a lot of if-then statements to analyze data and evaluate data, whether to include it, whether to not include it, because it's very simple and my brain is very simple. There are much more powerful techniques with statements, for statements, things like that, that go through a lot of data much faster than if-then statements. So the result is this is kind of bloated code that isn't optimized, and it will take time to run. So when it runs, you might get the little blue circle. You might this screen itself might go white. It may completely fail to refresh the screen. You might get the little header up above that says this program is not responding stuff. So all of the usual suspects that tell you that an application is not running properly, you might see those warnings. Don't worry about it. Ignore it. It just hang in there. It's running. It will eventually finish. And when it finishes, this window will go away and you'll be staring at your data. So um, depending on how much data you have, you might see one or more of those things that sort of indicate to you something's wrong. It's broken. Oh, don't worry, it's not broken. It's just chugging along. Just give it some time. So we'll go ahead and crunch data and see what happens. So I'm hitting the crunch data, and you can kind of see some things flickering in the back. It's chunking through. Again, most of that's indicative of poor programming technique from me, because I have lots of limitations. So it's getting through everything, and we'll just see how long it takes. We're not getting any weird screens, at least, but we still may. Okay, so there it is. It's done. And we're looking at the Replen database. So through all of that, you can see now that it married up the name of the person with the user ID, their employee number, their team that I loaded in, and the date. And again, that date from a Kronos perspective was the start date of that shift. It was the grouped by date. Now I've now added week numbers in, and I've also added sort of the date of that week number. So week 18 started on April 30th. I put in the activity, whether this was a fill active direct or a reserve case pull. And then we have home code hours, which will be duplicated. So, on May 1st, Gabe didn't work 34.34 hours in home. He worked 0.17, but it's grouped both. But so in the fill active direct, I can see that he worked 3.8 hours with 44 cases, which was 11.5 cases per hour, and so on and so forth. And I can just scroll through. Everything has been consolidated for all of the people that are on the night shift. Okay, so it's all there. Now, my recommendation to you is to create a new workbook to kind of your master database and sort of copy and paste this over. And you can just, maybe do, create a copy and put that into a new workbook. And so once you have that, now you can save this as, kind of your master, and then you have and you can just keep adding to this as you grow your database. Going back to our Replen data cruncher. So that's the raw data, right? This is now your raw data that you can use. Now, this is still not something that you can necessarily share. You can't just print this out and post it on the bulletin board. You still have to do some things. And one of the things that I want to do is consolidate too, right? Because the daily rates don't tell me a lot. They're too lumpy, and there's too much variability. Plus, I have the whole shift problem. Here's a good example of a shift problem, right? So Gabe has data for cases and units on Friday, the 5th of May. But of course, he doesn't have any hours because we don't work Friday. So why does he have case data and not hour data? Because the hour data is actually in the previous day's shift. This was all after midnight. So after midnight, he had this amount of cases and units. Those really should be up in this row. It's just kind of a mess. It's the problem with PM shift. That's why daily rates don't work real well for us, but weekly does fine. So we go back over to the control panel, and we're going to generate a report. When I do that, it pulls up another user form. A lot of this is grayed out. These are non-functional. I mean, you can tick all these if you want. It's not going to do anything. They're completely non-functional right now. So this is going to ask me, do I want to do a fill active direct or a reserve case pull report? I'm going to do fill active direct, and then I hit the generate report, and it's going to take those raw data in the Replen DB, which are still there, but now it created three looks. One is data by week. So now it's consolidated. So I took all of Gabe's data for week 18, and now it's all consolidated into hours, cases, and I know that for the week of April 30th, those 5 days, his average was 14.6 cases per hour. It also gives me the monthly look. So for the month of May, he's got 17.4. Why? Because there were 2 weeks in this data set, and you'll see that this isn't actually an average, right? You can't take the average. That would be ridiculous. You need to take the geometric average, which this does. It actually looks at all the hours and the cases and gets 17.4, etc. And it does year to date. This one is interesting because the month, this is just 1 month, so that these data will look the same for year to date versus cases per hour. So, but this gets us closer to something that we can report, but it's probably not what you want to report. So again, I would export this into some other program so that you can use it. So I'm going to create a copy. I'll throw it where I put that other stuff. So I'll create a copy of it over there. That's as far as this tool will get you. All right, it'll take you. So if you want daily rate information, that's already there. Boom, that's in your Replen DB. If you want it distilled down by week and by month, again, that's all here. And now you can play around with this to your heart's content and arrange it in a way that you want to report or print or share with other people. But it's probably not quite there yet. And that's why you want to know some more commands. For example, you probably, if I wanted to share this, I would probably create a pivot table. So I'm going to create a pivot table, and I'm going to say, by week, and I'm going to grab my data here, right, and say, okay, and then I want my name here, and then I actually want my week number at the top, and then my cases per hour here. So this is probably the type of data that I would actually prefer to show, and I'd take the subtitles off, and I'd take the grand total off. This is more like the data that I would like to show, where I have names on the side, and I've got the dates running across the top, and then I can present this out, or the employee numbers. But I'm not going to run through all of this. This gives you, an idea of how you might work with the data afterwards. So you still have to do some work, manual work, to get down to more presentable data than something that looks like that. But at least now it's just common Excel functions that get you there. Okay, so going back here, we did all of that. And so that was the PowerPoint that you got through. Going back, let's talk about tips and look forward. So, as we talked, the most important thing is to set this tool up, to get the right names in there, the right IDs, make sure that they are identical to what comes out of Kronos and the reports. Um, the limitations are what they are. If you want to, you can go in and look at the code. So in the whole, most Excel doesn't doesn't have the developer tool shown. It's hidden. You can just show it with the options. I'm not going to go through that right now, but if you just go through the file and your options down here, um, you can you can show the developer window. But if you go into Visual Basic, um, if you're a programmer, if you like this stuff, it's all open. I don't have any of this locked down. You can go in. So like if we look at the control panel, um, you can delete things if you want. You can change what I've written in your own version. You can go into the code and you can look at all of the, this is the code. This is how it works. If you want to get in here, I've tried to put some comments in there so that if people really want to get elbows deep, they can certainly do that. Um, more options. This is just, hey, if this is useful, we can always develop this farther and get to the point where it does give you a polished report. But otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. If you have problems, if you have bugs, let me know. Um, be specific, and if you can, give me the data. So not just, hey, when I put hourly data in here, I got 3 different errors. Give me the data file. So like if you had Kronos data that caused it to crash, send me this. Right? Send me the data so that I can put your Kronos data in there and experience that crashing. I built this tool for Mike earlier, and we went through 3 revs because I'm not great at programming. I made some mistakes. So right now this works great for my data, but it might not work great for yours because there's nuances that I just didn't test or was aware of. But hopefully that helps. Give me a holler if you have questions. Thanks.